for joining me today. I've been kind of following the Hidden Genius Project for a while now. I think a couple years it came on my radar, and I kind of saw it, and I was like, man, this is really interesting sort of approach to whether it's education, whether it's turning boys into men for lack of a better term, and really just looking at different approaches of how we can get to arm these kids with tools and education at an early age to kind of go out and crush the world, right? And really make that impact for themselves in their lives, but also their community. So before we get into the Hidden Genius Project, I really kind of want to go through your journey because you have a really interesting one, a lot of educational foundation in everything sort of you do. So kind of talk a little bit about your journey.
When we look at the journey to get to the Hidden Genius Project, it took a number of people. I'm fortunate to be the founding executive director, and yet we had some extremely enterprising founders
Mm-hmm.
who led the way, including a couple of buddies of mine. But I'll start with my own journey and get us there. I'm from Oakland, California, grew up in public schools in Oakland through middle school, and then attended a private high school in Marin County, which is one of the wealthiest counties per capita in the United States, basically through a program called the A Better Chance program that connects young people of color with the opportunity to pursue education at prep schools.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
had a great time. And yet, I think immediately learned that this was not an experience. Having a quality education and access to a wealth of resources was not an experience that should be the domain of just a certain set of people. There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing more impressive about the young people I attended high school with that seemed to entitle them to greater opportunity than, say, the young people I attended middle school with, right?
Right, right.
And the only difference in determination of who was going to get what sort of access was their zip code
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
where they had the fortune of being born. So right in there, right in that transition, I think was born my interest in commitment to issues of equity, access, and policy, among other things. And I ended up deciding, well, I think I want to pursue life and a mission that helps create access and really helps people who need more access do better. And so I set out from high school thinking that I probably want to major in public policy with a focus on education. And that's eventually what I did in undergraduate, and eventually would actually do a graduate degree in it as well. But for me, it's really just about finding some way to effectively democratize, opportunity, and just understanding how much brilliance there is in our communities. I was fortunate to grow up as really like fourth generation college student, which is pretty wild. Many Black families, just because again of the nature and history of access in the United States, and yet it's been engagement in access to education has been something that's been a hallmark. My family. The irony of that, though, is found myself navigating. You call it almost karmic circumstances. Of even being fourth generation, but not being particularly wealthy, and even by high school, finding myself on public assistance and having extremely limited means for much of that time. And it was probably one of the greatest benefits I could have received, just to have, I think, that level of perspective. Right. On one end, certainly just being able to have an appreciation for what is possible and have certainly a certain level of support, investment, and expectation. On the other level, understanding certainly you cannot take anything for granted. Also, that there are any number of factors that inform who we are, and what our status is, and what our material situation is, that go beyond just credentialing. Beyond that, though, just understanding, humility too, that at
Yeah.
any point in time along my journey, I wasn't more or less worthy, capable, fundamentally intelligent, nor was anyone I was growing up around. And so if that's the case for me, that's got to be the case for, all of us, right? And so I can understand that, sometimes you can fly high and be doing all the great things and the right things in the institution. And sometimes you got to get it out the mud. But each of us has tremendous potential.
So I wanna dive into a little bit of policy and maybe what you've learned over the years, whether it's through school, through your public work, through your day-to-day sort of life journey and sort of what you dedicated your life to. What is what is the good and bad, I guess, about policy, and maybe what have you seen over the years that, needs to be changed? Are there easy things that can be changed at a fundamental level that will make a big impact? I guess, where are we at sort of with policy nowadays, in just the overall picture of public education, and maybe what can be changed and what's maybe doing to impact it to make it better?
Certainly with time, I get it. Perhaps sometimes more jaded, but I'd like to
Yeah.
think more seasoned, maybe, and just a certainly deeper perspective, not necessarily better on these matters. Certainly when I was thinking about going into policy, it was all
Hmm.
about, there ought to be a law or there ought to be a rule, and let's figure this out because, clearly nobody else wants to. Um, and I think in times, and we see it obviously sometimes in our, state capitals and our, federal legislatures, et cetera, it can feel that way, and probably rightfully so. And that having been said, I think one of the things I learned that was like the big level up for me, where, it's like, okay, now you're grown up, you got to understand this is that, of course, policy is still very much politics. I mean, it doesn't
Hmm.
have to be, votes and campaigns. It can just be understanding who the stakeholders are, where the interests are, and that the greatest policy, the greatest set of practices, rules, and conditions for a given area, in the world can mean nothing if people don't back it, if people don't implement it the way it's designed, if people don't
Mm.
believe and aren't invested. And especially in the climate we see today, that seems like awful news.
Hmm.
Right? Like, you have to say we need greater investment, greater, consensus, or, harmony, at least not necessarily consensus, but
Yeah.
engagement with one
Hmm.
another. Is tough.
Seems impossible, huh?
Yeah, for sure. And but the reality is it's not even just about, kind of reaching across the aisle and things like that. I remember when I was in grad school, I believe my third year, I did a fellowship with a program called Education Pioneers, and all about bringing leaders or potential leaders, who were studying in different disciplines. So I was in a school of education studying policy. There are folks in schools of policy, law school, business school, public administration, so on and so forth, but all who were interested in educational equity and in many ways educational policy. So I had a placement at Oakland Unified School District where I was basically interning there for a summer in one of their, policy offices. And right around then, just recently, within the last few years prior to that, been, placed into state receivership. So there'd been a state takeover of the district,
Mm. Okay.
especially from the standpoint of its finances and policy decisions. And I started to, wonder about how that happened and all that. But then as I'm getting to the district, I'm also starting to hear and see about who all is pouring money into the district. And
Hmm.
especially at this particular time, this was, the mid aughts, a lot of private money, a lot of, private foundations and or money tied to, business and corporate leaders. Depending on who you are, that might sound nefarious or that might sound like a great thing. And for me, the reality was it didn't matter, right?
Right.
It was just a reality that
Hmm.
I've been doing this calculus in my head about how do I get the votes and whose hand I'm going to shake. And, I envision myself, taking some out to a power lunch and making a presentation, but I understand that this is an entire other, element, right? This entire other component of what it takes to make policy, make rules, etc. And then certainly, in that same vein, also some tremendous community organizations and grassroots organizations that are moving people in movement building and are advocating for change and things, who also have a certain set of influence in and around schools and have something to say about what our experiences look like and then how things get done. And so you realize, oh shoot, you have to understand like how they move as well if you want this to work. And so, I think we come back though to your question about what's missing. One of the biggest challenges is just that you're really as a nation at kind of cross purposes with kind of our history and where we're going when we look at the institution itself. Common schooling was not built for all young people to be in it and to pursue the same path, right?
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
start with, you go back to the 19th century, Horace Mann and all the, or even go back generations and generations of communities educating their young people themselves. These look different, but they were intimate for specific purpose, say a
Hmm.
localized purpose within community. And then, of course, we see really the acceleration and advent of more kind of common schooling at scale, I think during wartime, right, in the 20th century, especially by the time you get to, World War II era, trying to be able to, mass produce common understanding around our civic values and identity around being able to follow a pathway into productivity, particularly to support the war effort, et cetera.
Yeah.
And so, even before we dig into all the policy, it's even to understand and recognize and that this was not really a space meant for everyone to be like on a certain track, be that the college track, the
Yeah.
happiness track, the
Hmm.
creative track, wasn't
Yeah.
built that way.
Totally.
It was all about, localized individual experiences. And so one of the greatest policy challenges we have is we're not even able to fully sit down with that at scale, on a large scale, and recognize, oh man, this thing wasn't built for this. Well, what do we do now? We've kind of keep
Right.
chipping at it, tweaking at it. Sometimes we've kept people from it,
Just
Brown
put
v. Board of
band-aids on it.
Education. Yeah, exactly.
Let's talk a little bit about the Hidden Genius Project and I guess its mission, right? And maybe trying to fix some of these issues, whether it be from what you guys do from just a program perspective, or even working on policy. But what sort of is its at its fundamental level its mission and its goals?
I think it's probably best to tell maybe the origin story there a little
Yeah,
bit, and
for sure.
now I'll do my best to keep it tight. But a couple of my buddies, Jason Young and Ty Moore, had come out to Oakland and wanted to pursue their own careers in tech, building a business, building actually a really dynamic gaming company that was teaching young people about financial capability skills
Mm,
through mobile learning, experiential
hmm.
learning, mobile gaming. And Jason's from Los Angeles area, Ty from Cincinnati. They attended Harvard together, and they're still okay guys. After so they're all right. But I knew them from a scholarship program called the Ron Brown Scholar Program, which was named for the late Secretary of Commerce from the Clinton administration, Ronald H. Brown. And once he passed away in '96, friends of his immediately established a scholarship in his name for students of African descent entering college with the intent of building a dynamic network, Black young people who eventually would grow, I imagine, into older people, and but who are committed, as part of a lifelong network for social change. And so they, developed like a $40,000 unrestricted scholarship to,
Hmm.
get you to come for the money, stay for the network and the impact. And their tagline, their mantra is the value of one, the power of all. And also their kind of tag was Scholars for Life. And the reason why that's important is because then when you look up about 10 years later, after, Jason was one class, I was the next class, Ty was the class
Mm,
after me. When Jason and Ty came out about 10 years after we first met to Oakland, they said, look, we're building this for-profit business, but we want to pay it forward. We see an opportunity in the community to do something to engage the young men we see. And we want to be able to help them elevate their potential, certainly just with whatever skills and interests they have, but also just that leadership potential they have to be able to drive the change in their communities. And we want to do it by way of like empowering them to be able to build technology and be
mm,
entrepreneurs.
mm.
And so they said, we're going to start this thing up, and everybody's still working full time and doing all this, but we're going to try and make it happen right away. It's called the Human Capital Initiative. What do you think? It's like, well, man, I love everything you just said, but the name, that last piece, I just said in my head. And thankfully, as they really picked up three additional founders, Kurt Collins, Isaac Hayes, and Kilimanjaro Robs, these three highly entrepreneurial and dynamic Black men, and an entire village of folks out there who are willing to jump in. They also managed to sit down and workshop the name. And here we are, the
Mhm.
Hidden Genius Project, all about revealing potential in young people, especially our Black male youth, and just helping them see what's already there and giving them the tools. And what I would say is, those guys started kind of building the infrastructure for being able to do the day to day. I was actually volunteering from the outset. Some of my background on policy and
Mm,
assessments, research, evaluation. I was actually working in research and evaluation at the time. And so just helping to try and give some perspective on what making a solid infrastructure. But for the first 2.5 years, the organization ran just very much grassroots, just all about the mission, all about creating these opportunities without much knowledge, and probably with no business actually doing it. and yet there's just a great commitment. And just when you think about how it started, the first cohort we ever had, our mission is to train and mentor Black male youth in technology creation, entrepreneurship, and leadership skills to transform their lives and communities. And our core program is what's now a 15-month intensive
Mm.
cohort-based program for Black male youth in high school. You spend about 800 hours with us, and these days it's been
Wow.
virtually.
Yeah.
But learning to build technology, learning about the fundamentals of business and entrepreneurship, and how to drive that into their leadership work. So this, again, the first cohort we ever had in this regard was in 2012. We had a group of 5 that we just pulled off the street, and I have no idea why their families were so mad at them that they made their sons and grandsons and young people come be with us when we had no idea what we're doing. It almost felt negligent, right? But it was a fantastic group, and a lot of heart there. But these guys were, the whole idea was to set these guys up to be solid engineers, and so they were going to be programming 8 hours a day. And the goalpost kept kind of
Mm.
moving. It was like, are we going to do like 8 hours? We're going to do that first week it was like, we're going to do all 5 days. We'll do Monday through Thursday. Then it's like, well, maybe we could do half days. And then basically within 3 weeks it's like, oh no, this is not like a summer program, this is a
Yeah.
multi-month, like almost 2 year
Intense.
whatever program. Yeah, because there's so much going on in it. And I think guys kept like realizing bit by bit, like, oh, this isn't even about the skills and the like, this is all about development of a whole young person,
Hmm.
whatever they might need. And they all have different things going on, or they're making different decisions, including a number with which we may not agree, right? But it was all about just getting these guys some exposure and getting their hands in the space so that they could build what they want, so they could go where they want to go. And so it's never been about, for example, trying to create more pipelines into big tech companies that we know about. It's never been a response to diversity numbers in Silicon Valley or anywhere else in the
Mm.
world. It's all been about empowering our young people for all the potential they have, and making sure they know how to build the things their community needs and can't live without, and then go from there. And they can still work at companies, including some of the big companies we know, but we can't make it about trying to get there as some sort of farm system, especially when so many
Mm.
of these companies haven't built the infrastructure to support them and advance them and empower them once they get there.
Hey there. My name is Asa Goldstein, and I'm the founder of Brandshine Creative Services, a boutique branding agency that helps ingenious heroes save the world, one idea at a time. We work exclusively with impact startups like yours, empowering your success by building your unforgettable brand, your eye-catching visual identity, and your state-of-the-art website. To learn more about how we can help your startup compete against the mainstream brands that stand in your way, and to book your free brand audit, visit brandshinecreative.com.
So is the organization embedded in schools, or is it like is that like an after school program,
Yeah.
that sort of the longer one, or is there some that's embedded in the school districts and then there's some after school? Like how does that work?
Yeah, so the young people who want to participate in our intensive find out about us all sorts of ways, and from within their schools, word of mouth, word of mom, as we say, dad,
Yep.
grandpa, auntie, social media, a lot of great partners we have who we do work with. We've got this intensive, that's our core program, but over the years, we've developed a number of, you might say, companion programs, including programs we're actually partnering with other community organizations to deliver
Hmm.
programming where they are, or even
Hmm.
schools as well. And so we're an out of school program for our core work, and most of what we do is absolutely out of school, after school, summer times, very intensive.
Mm.
But
Hmm.
we do have some great school partners, and then we do have some schools where we've been actually been able to work there, sometimes after school, but sometimes even during the school day, where they've
Yeah.
contracted with us to do work, and that's been cool. We recently, in the last year plus, expanded to Los Angeles, and have been running now our second cohort out of Los Angeles, even
Mm.
as we're headquartered in Oakland, and we also have a site in Richmond, California. But we've also been fortunate to start like building these relationships with schools and districts and around the areas where we are, including Los Angeles, and having the opportunity to actually work with actual school systems to
Right.
design and deliver programming and opportunities to their young people.
That's
So
huge.
people are
I
hearing
like
about
that.
us any number of ways, and we're trying to come at this thing from all angles. We're doing any number of creative things, and our programming is taking us right around the corner, but as far away as London
Yeah.
and Johannesburg, South Africa, right? So like
Yeah.
we're trying to get it in however we can.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask next was, obviously the pandemic has made everything virtual, right? So has that enabled the mission and the sort of curriculum to expand further? Or
Mhm.
has it been, detrimental because being in class with, with your fellow sort of cohort is like a powerful thing, right? To physically be there with them and like work at it together seems to have some real positive energy behind it versus everything online. But how has that sort of obviously very, very drastic, quick change, has that
Yeah.
been, beneficial in some areas? Has it been hurtful? Has it been helpful?
Yeah. I think the answer is yes, right? To all of the above. Extremely proud of our team and also our young people have been extremely resilient. And we entered into quarantine here in California on
Mm,
March 16th. And by March 16th, that was our first day. We held a virtual meeting. We basically were literally in the office on March 13th on that Friday.
right, right.
And planning to do any number of activities even that weekend, and had to cancel them. And Rich showed up, to do a group video conference on the 16th and try to path forward. And by the 18th, we were programming, virtually, never looked back. Came up with a plan. One of the key ingredients was actually, and I left that out as I was talking about our other components we design in our partnership. When we're not doing our intensive, the majority of the programming we deliver is actually facilitated by alumni of our program, by young
Mm,
people, young
that's
youth
cool.
leaders that,
Yeah.
that we train as youth facilitators, call them youth educators. So our contract work, our events, we're always supporting and working there, but it's just trying to maximize our effectiveness, extend our bandwidth, create near peer networks and cascading mentoring opportunities, really try and empower these young guys. And they get paid. They
Yeah.
work, especially in the state of California with some of the labor laws, they're basically part-time employees for us, right? So
Yeah.
one of the key ingredients was basically hiring those guys in mass,
Yeah.
to try and get back to programs who could create smaller learning environments to get more help and more perspective, more hands on deck. So they jump into a Zoom with us. So if we're going to have 20 guys in a
Mm,
Zoom, we're going to have 3, 4 alumni or more, in there with us and doing breakouts and trying to be in smaller learning environments and figure this thing out. So it's been a lot of that for the last year and a half. Our intensive hasn't met in person. We had a couple partners who've met in person where we've done some of that programming in person, and with mixed outcomes in terms of great engagement educationally. But one of the sites we went to ended up having a few cases, COVID-19
sure.
cases, had to shut down, and so everybody's trying to figure this out. But we've been hanging tough. We tried some new things and have been able to, collaborate with a partner that's, for example, based in London. And that relationship grew from the last, couple of years prior, 2018, 2019, when we were traveling to London and doing programming there. And so being able to like engage with Youth of Keller,
Yeah.
6,000 miles away is tremendous. And then events we did just to like inspire young people from different networks around the world that we've connected with and inspire them around different pathways and related to technology, but related to areas of interest that they might already have, like fashion, sports,
Mm,
business, emerging technology, entertainment, and just seeing how tech ties in and having these dynamic guests come in and talk about their experiences. And that was amazing, being able to do that and know that at any point in time there might be someone from South Africa, Europe, or Hawaii just tapping in. So that's been a great opportunity. The flip side, though, is of course just for our intensive work. It's just
hmm
really tough to keep doing this for a year and a half, and there's so many young people who are battling so much already. So then being in
Right.
this environment was tough for them, just isolating, sometimes just depressing or
Yeah.
disengaging.
The
And
program could be an escape for him originally,
oh, absolutely. And
yeah.
we're doing anything from feeding them to just hanging out, laughing, sometimes
Yeah.
even, shooting a basket or two or whatever it is. But, all of that goes out the window. It's just the stuff. And then just something as
Mm,
simple as like, what's it mean to even take attendance in this area, right? So it's like, well, Grant signed on. Have you seen Grant? I mean, because,
hmm
back in the day,
Yeah.
if Grant came to the spot, you're here. Like, we're going to see you trying to like creep by the doors. We'll be right
Yeah.
by the doors and you're going to be here for the next 2 hours. You sign on the Zoom, we're like, it's great to see you, Grant. You're like, yeah, all right. And then 19 minutes later, it's like, anybody seen Grant? You just kind of slip away, either with, just a click in the X right on your window, or, your Wi-Fi goes down, or uncle asked you to take out the trash. It could be all this sort of stuff happening. And it's just been wild that way. And so we had to really, I think, steel ourselves for, a different type of environment and try and be adaptive, and then give ourselves a lot of grace and forgiveness, and really celebrate that we're working extra hard. to try and provide these opportunities.
With the intensive program, like what does that look like? Is it training people how to make mobile games, like literally
It
learn
can, yeah,
JavaScript from the ground up, like
that
learn
too, yeah,
Xcode, like take I
that
guess
as well, absolutely.
they go in, probably pretty bare, not knowing too much, right? And then
Yeah,
they
and
come
it's
out of
across the
it.
board.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
across board. It's a range, both. But yeah, everything you named is a thing. We're getting young people from any number of backgrounds, and you're getting young people who kind of fit any number of stories and archetypes. So a lot of people are saying, well, of course you're just doing this just for like the low income, right? Everybody else is gonna make it. I'm like, well, somebody forgot to tell me that, what I'm saying? Just because, like, based on whatever experience, like, and I'm very
Yeah.
fortunate to have gotten where I am, because people will say, well, look at you. I'm like, well, I could point to any number of people, even with my profile, had extremely tough time along the way, especially if you're talking about up to 18,
Yeah.
regardless of what their grades were and all that. That's to say nothing of, again, we started off talking about, access and all that. And again, it's just not equal access, even if you have some means, and there's different structural and
Yeah.
experiences. Racism is still a thing, and it's not something we need to like debate or bandy about. It's just, is a thing, as are any number of
Yeah.
isms, right? So
Hmm.
what we're trying to do is create a safe space and a solid network of young people to come together from their backgrounds, lean on each other, and have a better chance at a more meaningful and fulfilling life experience. And so, the tech is one way to get there. We have guys who've never done anything before, and then tried and love it. We have guys who've done it a bunch and really don't like it at all. But we've been able to evolve over time and establish different tracks. The first alternative track we established was our business track.
Yeah.
So, allowing guys to build out businesses and business ideas more intensively and holistically, and even lean on some of their peers and their brothers to be able to help them, in some instances, prototype what their
Build.
business
Yeah.
might look like,
Yep.
but allow them to really anchor in their passion. And then to your point, there's some folks who love gaming and would rather not build, some sort of website or interactive such and such, that's not about gaming. Or some people want to learn about machine learning, or some people rather build via web and not via, mobile. So we had been doing a lot of work and like
Yep.
Xcode and all that, but we've been able to diversify over time, which we're really proud of. Probably leaned a little bit away from Xcode of late, because we started digging more into Flutter and being
Yep.
able to do cross-platform development
Yep.
For mobile. But then you have
Well,
some
that's the thing.
people.
It
Yeah.
changes every 3 to 5
Oh,
years as
absolutely,
new
absolutely,
programs come out that are a little better, and like
absolutely, absolutely.
you learn
You got to
that. But the
stay with it, and
foundations
that's
are
the big
always
thing.
there, though. If you got the
Yeah,
foundations there, you can kind of move
and that's
to
what we want to
different
impart.
platforms and programs. Yeah.
That's what we want to impart too, is you're learning a skill. Like, you might be working on a project that you don't love, or have an assignment that doesn't feel like you, but
Hmm.
the name of the game is figuring out how that applies to all the things you are interested in. So we really have to anchor there and start with what people love and try and connect them with that, and then go from there. So it's been quite a run to this point, be able to just even understand how to engage with young people. And every day we're learning, every day, honestly, we have like these what feel like losses in the moment, like we did not get that right. That's okay. We have to
It's all right.
we
Yeah.
we have to keep learning, and humble ourselves. One of our senior team members yesterday shared a message he had gotten from a genius he woke up to. This guy, team member's on his vacation, not supposed to be emailing us at all, but I guess he got like a Slack from one of our geniuses who'd been in that description. One of the guys who, for the last year and a half, he's been a guy you described as like, nah, he's behind on this work, he's not doing
Hmm.
that, he can't
Hmm.
get him to turn his camera on, this, that, and the other. But he's been going through a ton, and within the last like month to 2 months, it finally led on that like he was really going through it and actually seeking counseling and therapy, and wanted help to be able to access that, and his family could only afford but so much, maybe 20% or so
Sure.
of what sessions cost. And so they submitted for like a emergency grant, emergency support request. So we basically agreed to like pay the difference
Wow.
so he could get
Wow.
that help. And that maybe it was because he heard that, or maybe it was completely unrelated. But shortly thereafter, like a day or two after, this young person like messages to this team member who's out on vacation, like, hey man, I can't thank you all enough, you guys have really changed my life. And mind you, like just weeks ago we're talking about how this cat's
Yeah.
not doing his stuff, but we're still hanging in there with them, right? We don't view them or judge their worth as a function of how happy they're making us or how many assignments
Right.
they're doing. And I think that's really the lasting impact of what we're able to do. So there is all the like the curricular stuff and how to do design thinking, rapid prototyping, and how
Mm-hmm.
to build out your idea and do market research, understanding the history of certain social movements or identity, and especially Black identity and social constructs, and how all these things tie into who we want to be and how to be socially responsible entrepreneurs or professionals or human beings. And all that is tremendous, but at the end of the day, it's just a day-to-day struggle and battle to just fight
The
for the
grind.
humanity and the
Yeah,
wellness
man.
of these young people.
Hello, friends. This is Paul Shapiro, author of the book Clean Meat, CEO of the Better Meat Co., and host of the Business for Good podcast. Lots of people are excited about the potential of plant-based meat to address key sustainability concerns associated with raising animals for food. But those of us in the alternative protein sector can't maximize our impact if we're not presenting our message to customers in the most effective way. That's why I was so glad that my own startup, the Better Meat Co., worked with Brandshine Creative to help us better understand the needs of our own key customer demographic, to create a branding identity guide to keep our appearance consistent, and to overhaul our website to make it, frankly, a lot more useful. Working with Brandshine was a helpful experience for us that's made our company better at doing what's most important to us, building a more sustainable protein supply chain.
It's amazing, man. I got two more questions. One is around schools and kind of working with school districts. How has that been? Has it been difficult? Like, is there policies in place where it has to go through a bunch of different yeses to get a third party, like not outside nonprofit, to come in, set up some
Right.
curriculum? Because this seems like the hybrid model that could really work. You kind of get your morning classes, your history, your math, your science, like the core sort of STEM, if you will. But then second half of the day is curriculum that you guys build out, right? Or
Right.
equivalent, sort of, where you actually get to learn life skills, right? It's so that's always been my issue coming out of high school. I went to both private and public, so I saw the differences in certain things, but I came out really like not with many like core like skill sets. You got friends and you got your network, right? But that doesn't really necessarily like actually like help you like move forward in life if you don't really have many skills, like actual hard skills. And so I think learning that at such an early age, bringing in professionals that know what they're doing, right? Like have curriculum set up, know what platforms and programs that will really benefit them in the long term, or certain skill sets around business or whatever it may be. How unimaginable is that that schools can come more around to like implementing different curriculum within public schools, right? Because like that, it seems like we need stuff to change around, like kids having fun and wanting to learn stuff in school, like if they're there.
No, I feel you. Well, yeah, and we need to make sure we don't lose your point that you just made, which is, we've got actually some gaps in schooling, period.
Yeah.
What the Febreze for all that, and sorry, I'm sure they're not a sponsor, but we'll call it the wallpaper or the the odor repellent or what have you. For that is the landing spot, right? So we keep saying, well, if our children in our community are landing in college, or they still get quote unquote great jobs or high paying jobs, like we're just gonna keep running this thing. But the reality is, the guy at my school, I remember he ran for student government. The year I ran, and he was extremely like passionate as a high school junior at the time about scripts, and he was from Marin County, from fairly solid, wealthy background. And scripts was like a program where you could like take funds from like going shopping and pay almost with like gift certificates where some of the money goes back to the school. And he was like highly practical, like 16, 17-year-old guy, but he was talking about like scripts and like experiential education for like life skills with it, like his two platforms. He lost by a lot, right? He was ahead of his time, right? But it was a beautiful, I loved it too. And I'm like, oh, this guy's dope. Like
you're running against them, you're like, I'll vote for him.
I mean, straight up, like I was like, I love what he's saying. He's not going to win, but I love what he say. It's dope. But we ended up actually serving on the board of that same school years later. It always stuck with me because we talk about the experiential part. He's like, you leave this school that's now costs like $52,000 a year to go to, right? And
Crazy.
you leave not knowing how to change a tire, how to do your
Mm,
taxes, how to
yeah.
right, do
It's
all these things,
unbelievable. Yeah.
these life things. Yeah, even in some instances, balance a budget,
Yep. Yep.
cook even, right? So what's happening with education, right? Sometimes we keep talking about like public education, and we got to get people caught up and people are falling behind. But in reality, like to your point, by and large, do we put pressure on schooling, as we like design schooling to do as much as it can, as we can do? Do we trust that we can get to some of the other outcomes by focusing on and just on a richer experience? And it seems like right now the answer has been no. So when you look at public schools, there's a range there too, right? I live in Oakland, but Oakland within it has a town with its own city hall and water district called Piedmont, where it
Hmm.
has extremely high resource public school. Now in California, the way that works is there's actually a cap on how much you can fund a public school just for off your property taxes. So it's
Hmm.
a low floor and a high ceiling, really, in many ways. But what wealthy communities do is, I call them thermometer towns, because you'll see those wealthy towns, they'll have like at the town library, city hall, or whatever it is, you'll see like a thermometer where they're doing their own private fundraising, kicking in that money up to some percentage of what it would
Right.
cost to go to a private school anyway. And that's how you get a well-resourced public school that's able to like
Sure.
deliver all these things. And even
Sure.
then, they're just delivering the same stuff that the next school is. They just have more money to do it. Like they're not necessarily innovating. What I
Right.
will say
Right.
is then oftentimes then our public schools with either lower income students and or young people of color, Black, Latinx, Indigenous, Southeast Asian, Pacific Islander, et cetera, students, they often then get to be the laboratory schools, where it's like, well, we're just gonna try a bunch of stuff here, because what's worse that can happen, and so that's kind of worked to our benefit and to the detriment, right? Like we had a school that was like, hey, we're going to be able to like do this academy for Black boys, a certain subset of Black boys in this high school will stay with their grade level with Black boys and just have classes, the core classes and the other classes just with this Black boy cohort every
Hmm.
day, ninth grade, 10th grade, 11th grade. And would you like to deliver, computer science and entrepreneurship classes on some alternating schedule, like during the day? And that was
Mm.
amazing with the African American Male Achievement Program, part of what's now Kingmakers of Oakland. But then, like, there's a budget crisis in Oakland, and that was one of the first things to get cut. But it was
Should be the
opportunity to try
last things
something
to get
different.
cut. It should
Well,
be the last
it's
things to get
it was a tough situation, right? We were just several $1 million in the hole, and each school had to just do really hard stuff, and I get it. But we're fortunate to be able to do that and at least try something different, try to create something experiential, and have young people imagine kind of who they want to be and how to integrate things like computer science and entrepreneurship into their history class. I thought that was a really cool
Shit, yeah,
approach.
man. Yeah,
So
that's
there are
amazing.
moments in which, like, it feels like we're going up against the bureaucracy and we're completing forms in triplicate and having to print them out,
Right.
But by and large, I'd say we've come across a lot of innovative, passionate people in the space who are trying to make an impact and willing to try new things. And nobody's really innovating that much. Like, even when somebody says, I want to start a school, and you say, well, let's close our eyes and imagine what that school is going to look like. Like, what are you going to do? They're like, well, I'm going to need desks. And you're like, oh, okay, what else? They're like, I'm going to need like a chalkboard or a whiteboard. No, it's going to be a projector. So it's not going to be like, well, where is it? Well, it's at the front of the class. Well, what are you going to have in there? You're going to have like adults or teachers or what? Like, probably the teacher, or where are they going to stand? Probably in front of the class. It was like, well, it sounds a lot like, it's such a deeply rooted and seated institution. Like we can't
Totally.
even
You can't
imagine
imagine something
breaking out
different.
of that,
Totally.
right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
even, and that's at the world's like Phillips Exeter, right? That's at what you name your public school in whatever
Right.
area that has no money, and everybody, they're doing the same stuff, right? And
Yeah.
it's tough to move beyond that.
At Brandshine, our comprehensive brand strategy process ensures that your impact brand is strategically positioned and can put its best foot forward to both investors and potential clients. Then, we work with world-class designers to craft your new logo and your unique visual flair. But we don't stop there. We write, design, and develop your new website in Webflow, a cutting-edge platform that delivers incredible websites that are easy to maintain without our help. To download the free 7-step guide to building a market-ready impact brand, visit brandshinecreative.com/causeartist.
Yeah, so my last question, man, would really just be about the future and maybe what is the sort of dreams and sort of goals that, you guys want to see within the organization. And I know it's kind of, with COVID, things change drastically, right? So different things that have to get adjusted and maybe curriculum or programs might have to change and all this different stuff. But, as it stands today, if you look sort of 3 to 5 years down the road, what is success for you? Is it more boys going to college? Is that it? Or is it
Yeah,
is it more people, just getting certain skills and starting their own companies, right? I know they just started a venture fund, I think, a small venture fund to sort of fund some of the
yeah,
alumni. I thought that was
yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
It seems like these are the things that you're kind of innovating within the organization, looking at ways to keep improving, and being in students' lives, right, throughout the history of their life and what they want to do, right? Not just,
absolutely.
a teenage years, but if they want to start a company, well, hey, let's put a fund together and we can help you do that as well. So that you've got the skill sets now and you went through the training and stuff like that. So I guess
And
long
that's that
question is,
connection to the Ron Brown Scholar Program, by the way, that Scholar for
oh,
Life.
really?
So Genius for Life, like that's what it was all about, is keeping folks close, that lifelong network for
Mm-hmm.
social change.
Totally,
That's why I
man.
mentioned it. So yeah,
Yeah,
full
no, it's
circle.
it's it's great, man. So
Yeah,
so just end on we'll just end on like that. Like what are the goals, man, and
yeah.
success that you'd like to see?
It's all about trying to have the happiest and most empowered and most hopeful young people we can. And for us, organizationally, being able to create a lot of access to opportunities and a lot of hope, and clear out space for young people to like basically do their thing, to get out there and cut. That we've got such capable young men. We look at like the work we're doing where our boys and young men, our youth leaders are facilitating that programming. You see
Yeah.
like right in your face the potential. Like these are the
Mm.
same guys driving you effing nuts. You know what I'm saying? But I love all of them, right? But it's like, man, but you watch them evolve into like these incredible leaders, and just all the stuff we're talking about, and all the times they're like half asleep or arguing about stuff or doing something else, and then they kick it back to some other young person, right? Or
Mm.
kick it forward, if you will. You're like, oh, you actually heard that, or you
Yeah.
got that, or whatever. Like, just there's something about that, right? It's like so deeply fulfilling, empowering. There's a lot of incredible people across the board: educators, grassroots organizations, for-profit CEOs, public officials, everything in between. There's a
Hmm.
lot of great people out here
Yeah.
doing great work. It really is. We magnify messages and narratives about the bad stuff because that bad stuff can hurt, and also it's sometimes just more interesting to talk
Yep.
about, I guess, on a
Yep.
given day. But there's a lot of tremendous stuff happening in the world, and we want to be in a position to help do more of it, and help collaborate with some of those great people to get more access to more young people, especially our Black boys and young men. But when they win, we're seeing everybody wins. When they're
Hmm.
out here teaching, this group of Southeast Asian girls in this program we partner with, like
Crazy.
that's not happening, but not for right our investment in these Black boys, right? Like it's cascading down, it's rippling out, however we want to say it. We're not here to chart their path. Some of them want to do things or don't even know what they want to do. We talk
Right.
about, what was it like to like counsel some of the world's greatest innovators, who ended up creating, some of the stuff we've seen for the first time. And I'm not going to give folks free advertising this time, but as people in their mind's eye imagine, some invention, right, or some technology or some site that they're like, man, like, and we always like bandy about the like legend story about how they, pull themselves up by their bootstraps, were self-taught, and this and that, and somehow that like 6 to 7 figure friends and family raise they did within their networks had nothing to do with their success. But whatever, it's fine. I'll buy it. But just the whole idea of like, imagine if we were like telling those folks like, no, be an insurance adjuster, it's stable. So we have to like really watch how we talk and manage the dreams of our young people. We
It's
talk a lot
it's
about
it's
this
a
with
great
respect to
point.
young people
It's
who
a
are
great point.
interested in sports, right? And it's definitely like a personal pet peeve of mine. I wrote my dissertation actually about youth sports and privatization and all these things.
Yeah, I saw that, man. I
But
saw that. It was cool.
oh, well, thank you. But we so often, we understand why you say, hey man, like can't help but notice that you're really into like the sports thing, and just know it's not that likely. You should find a backup. And when I was in high school, that school in Marin, like nobody was talking like that. And the reason
Hmm.
why was because nobody's getting their dreams killed that way. Now there's an understanding. Eventually, like people are coming to terms with this. Like, listen, Billy, you're peaking here, like you're topping
Yeah.
out at 5'8", 5'9" in a sport that's generally, bringing folks in that are 6'6" to 6'9", and you're a little slower, and honestly, you're not even, hitting the ball or making the shots or running as fast.
But maybe you should be an
But
agent. Maybe you try
hello, that's what it
sports
is, Grant. No,
management,
that
right?
100%. Nobody's saying,
Maybe be
have
a
you tried insurance
broadcaster,
adjustment? Right.
right?
No,
Yeah, yeah.
that's what it is. That's what you hear. Like I never heard anybody be like, so now it's time to be an insurance adjuster because that's stable, right? It's like, no,
Mhm.
you're impeding my like passion, my dreams when there's on any given night that the Warriors play, there's at minimum 1,000 people getting paid really great money, right?
Thousand
To
percent,
to
hundred
support who are
percent.
not on the court, right?
Yep,
And
yep.
and so it's like, what can you do that you love that can help you become like a better athlete, a better person, but keep you close to the game? And then the day that the game makes you
It's a
not be able to
great
play
point.
anymore, what do you have for that? And it's the same with innovation and the things you're yet to do. It's like, how do we support our young people to be able to just keep digging into what they love, what they're interested in, and still have expectations, still have boundaries, still have practices and rules, but like also just give them some room to cook, because these
Hmm.
self-made friends and family around guys are can't we all just
Dude,
be like them anyway? You got to give us some
that
opportunities. So
that
yeah,
is so fun. Like I hear that all the time. I was like, you do realize that like those family and friends like don't exist for 99% of the people on planet Earth, right? Like it's not a thing, and it's such a there should be the venture fund should be called like Friends and Family Fund or something to like make a
for
joke
sure.
about
As a
how
as not right.
ridiculous that
Yep.
is, because it really is like such a privilege to have that, to just go to your family and friends and they can just raise $500,000. Like that doesn't
Right.
exist in the real world.
And there's
So
just
that
so many
itself is such a
dynamics.
gap,
Right.
right? But now it's like, can the Hidden Genius Project be that gap? Can other
Right.
organizations or other companies find a way to fill that gap when somebody has an idea? Their
Yeah.
family and friends might not actually be their family or their friends,
Yeah.
but it's the
Right.
people that they built relationships with that they can go to,
Yeah.
like
And
you
then
guys
one
and
of the
others.
things we're looking at, we hope it's each other over time, right? And that's one of
Absolutely, man.
the
Yeah.
biggest things. But yeah, I mean, and I was thinking about this a lot, even just yesterday, but as you think about just generationally, obviously there's so much talk right now about learning about the history of the United States or the world. And unfortunately, a lot of it's been labeled even as critical race theory, which actually is a very fascinating discipline, has a lot of value. But most of the things that people are actually arguing against, like being taught, aren't critical race theory at all. But then when we don't know the history, we don't even understand, have a great grasp on why people are advocating for what they are or what the gaps and needs truly are. I've heard extremely supposedly well-meaning people say, listen, like I understand that we've got more work to do in this country, in this world, but things are better than they were before, which they are 100%. My grandmother told me that, right? She
Mm.
sat me down one day like, listen, I grew up in Tampa, she's 90, 3 years old now. I grew up in Tampa, going to the movies through a different door than
Mm.
everybody
Mm.
else in Tampa, right? Like sitting in a different level at that
Mm.
movie because I had to.
Yeah.
And we understood that if you did not, that was not going to be a great thing for your family, right? And she's like looking at me like, seriously, like, do you understand? So I'm like, okay, I get it. But also when you think about what does it mean, and as you talk to folks, populations of folks, and they can be Black populations, but you can talk about this across the board. But you have more stories even than we realize about when we understand like what the Great Migration is. Say Great Migration out of the South to the Northeast to the
Mm-hmm.
Midwest, the Great Migration or Second Great Migration even west from the Midwest and the South, to places like Oakland, LA, and the whole
Mm-hmm.
nine. Like it sounds so cozy, like we're it's the Great Migration, we're taking vacation. A lot of people over those years were basically like in trouble for either talking shit or not wanting to like take it from the community they were in, people there, people who are terrorizing them. This might have been government, so on and so forth. And a lot of them were like in very clear danger and had to just
Oh
drop
yeah, man.
everything and leave. If we
Yeah.
don't share them, then we start saying, well, I don't see a slave right now. I don't have a slave or whatever. But
Mm.
how does it relate? It goes back to this friends and family round. So if you have family and like if you start talking to enough people, especially like Black people in this country, you start talking to like somebody has some family who like had to get up out of somewhere quick. Like multiple family members the friends I know had to like get up out of like parts of Mississippi or like
Mm-hmm.
northern Florida or whatever fast, right? And like, so what happens when you have to do it? I'm talking about fast. I'm not talking about like I just asked for a transfer. I just requested a transfer at my job. I'm talking about like, I'm tired of being like leaned on. I said, I told somebody to kiss my ass, and now like
Yeah,
we
you got
got
to
to
get
go.
out. Yeah, you got to
Right.
go. Yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah.
what that
Right,
means
right,
is
right.
whatever you had built, whatever you
Totally.
had, you might even own some shit. You don't own it anymore. You left. Right.
Mm.
So like, you know what I'm saying?
It's a
Like you talk
lost
about the friends.
generation. It's a lost
Right.
generation of wealth
Okay,
building.
so you come back to that friends and family raised idea, right? Like it
Totally.
doesn't mean
Yeah.
even that people didn't know what they were doing. Like, talking about like my dad was telling me about his grandfather leaving Electric Mills, Mississippi. They were well established there, but it just got too hot in
Mm.
East Mississippi at that time so they had to get up out, right? Like Mississippi was solid, but they had to get up out of there. And like everything he had been building stayed there. So then you got to start over and,
Mm.
Geary and Dan it, right? And all this
Yep.
stuff. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so there's generations of that. And people are like, well, it's not my fault. Oh, okay. It's not about whose fault it is. You're understanding like the bootstraps were already there, but the bootstraps got
Right.
left in an
Right.
unlocked house because you're fleeing. And then what do? You might have to change. You might have to like alter
Mm.
some things about what you're doing so people can't find you
Mm-hmm.
because you piss them off and it was legal for you to possibly disappear, right? Like, so
Right.
like,
Right.
what does that do? What capacity have you built? And I'm not talking about 1790. I'm not talking about 1890, right? In 1990, some of the people who are
Yeah.
experiencing this or move are like 30 years old at that time, 15 years old, in 1990, right? Meaning like
Mm-hmm.
this stuff, right? I was born before 1990. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not all ancient history. And it's so important that we just at least learn and talk about it, and then understand. So when we're having conversations around like, why would a program create the friends and family round for someone's like, because of all this stuff, it's not just because you have this hapless group that can't get right or,
Mm-hmm.
this destitute group. There's some real wild stuff that's gone on and been going on, in our communities, in our country, etc. And we got to talk through and sort some of this stuff out and figure out who we want to be.